files. We've seen dozens of new photos we haven't seen before of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell with very high-profile people, celebrities, people like Mick Jagger and Michael Jackson, like you showed, also like British royalty and actors. All of that we sort of knew was happening. I want to highlight specifically two for the public interest, and that is President Clinton and President...
We've all seen the fall of powerful men before. Empires crumbling under the weight of their own secrets. Careers erased by a single indictment. Legacies rewritten overnight. But what we're witnessing now isn't just another scandal. It's a domino effect, a chain reaction of revelations so explosive that even the untouchables are starting to sweat. And at the center of it all, a name that hasn't been this relevant, or this vulnerable, in decades, Clive Davis. The man who shaped modern music, who discovered Whitney Houston, who launched careers from Alicia Keys to Notorious B.I.G., is now reportedly on the run, his lawyers scrambling to cut a deal with the FBI before the walls close in. This isn't history. This is happening right now.
The Justice Department has finally released some of the highly anticipated Epstein files. More than 300,000 pages of documents related to the late convicted offender were made public today. They include photos, flight logs, grand jury testimony, and a lot of heavy redacted.
The trigger? The latest dump of Jeffrey Epstein's long-buried files, a trove of documents so damning that they've sent shockwaves through every corner of power, politics, finance, entertainment. And buried in those pages, connections that can no longer be ignored. Sources familiar with the investigation tell us Davis's name appears in contexts that suggest more than just casual association. We're talking about logs, communications, and references that place him in the same circles where the most unthinkable allegations took root. But here's the twist. This isn't just about Epstein. It's about the man Davis once championed, the protege he helped turn into a mogul, Sean Diddy Combs. And with Diddy now sitting in a Brooklyn jail cell, facing federal charges of trafficking and racketeering, the questions are getting louder. What did Davis know? What did he enable? And why, after decades of silence, is he suddenly negotiating with federal prosecutors?
So what we're seeing is apparently not everything. We've got indications from the Department of Justice that there are things that are going to be withheld, at least, or handed out at a later date. Now, the law in this case that was passed by Congress and signed by President Trump required that all the Epstein files be released by midnight tonight, Friday, December 19th.
Let's rewind just a few months. March 2024. Diddy's homes in Los Angeles and Miami are raided by Homeland Security. His son's let out in handcuffs, his empire under siege. The charges? A pattern of coercion, exploitation, and what prosecutors describe as a decades-long enterprise of predatory behavior. The allegations aren't just from one or two accusers. They're from dozens, including his own former partner, Cassie Ventura, who detailed a relationship marked by control, physical abuse, and what her lawsuit called intimate servitude. Diddy's team has denied everything, calling it a witch hunt. But the feds aren't backing down. And now, as the case builds, insiders say Davis's name keeps surfacing in ways that suggest he wasn't just a bystander. He was a participant. This is where the Epstein files become critical. Among the thousands of pages released in late 2025, there are references to Davis that go beyond mere social circles. We're talking about travel logs, financial ties, and, most damning, alleged discussions about recruitment that align with the darker operations Epstein was known for.
Oh, but we have a congressional act now to requiring the release, but they're going to say, you know
subject
what?
To
Tom
redaction.
Hanks, it's unfair that he was mentioned because he was eating Skittles.
Subject to redaction. Subject to redaction.
And we all know what that means. That's to protect.
That's why I'm saying you will never be satisfied with what's released.
One document, dated 2011, includes a note about Davis attending a private gathering where the guest list reads like a who's who of the accused. Another mentions a transaction involving a shell company linked to both Davis and Epstein's network. And then there's the testimony. Multiple sources connected to the Epstein investigation have told reporters that Davis's name came up in interviews about how powerful figures in music and media were allegedly vetted for access to certain events. Events where the line between business and exploitation blurred into something far more sinister. But here's what makes this moment different. Davis isn't waiting to see how this plays out. He's acting. Over the past 2 weeks, his legal team has been in back-channel discussions with the FBI, according to 3 people with direct knowledge of the talks. The word immunity has been floated. So has cooperation. And then there's the fact that Davis, a man who once moved through award shows and industry galas like royalty, has vanished from public view. No appearances, no statements, just silence, except for the frantic activity behind the scenes. One industry insider put it bluntly, he's not hiding, he's positioning himself. And that only happens when you've got something to trade.
That I have a very special connection with artists, with music. I certainly know I had it with him.
Now, let's connect the dots to Diddy, because this isn't just about 2 men. It's about a system. Davis didn't just discover Diddy, he groomed him for stardom. In the early 90s, when Diddy was a 23-year-old intern at Uptown Records, Davis saw potential. He brought him into the fold at Arista, gave him a platform, and, by his own admission in interviews, helped him understand how to merge hip-hop with the mainstream. Diddy, in turn, became the architect of Bad Boy Records, a label that defined an era. But here's the question that's haunting the industry now. Was Davis also introducing him to something else? Something darker? We know from Diddy's own downfall that his parties weren't just legendary. They were allegedly hunting grounds.
And her and Clive had a fight 2 days before. And from what I was told, Bobby Christina was present for some of that fight.
The lawsuits describe a world where aspiring artists were lured with promises of fame, only to find themselves in situations they couldn't escape. One lawsuit from a former security guard claims he was sedated and assaulted at a 2006 white party. Another from a man who was 16 at the time alleges Diddy used the guise of industry rights to coerce him. And then there's Usher, who lived with Diddy as a teenager and later told Howard Stern that what he saw was pretty wild. So wild that he'd never let his own kids near that environment. When you look at the timeline, Davis wasn't just a distant executive. He was there, at the parties, in the meetings, and according to multiple accounts, he was fully aware of the culture Diddy was cultivating. But the connections don't stop with Diddy. They extend to the very heart of the Epstein network. In 2020, Suge Knight, yes, that Suge Knight, dropped a bombshell on his podcast, claiming that Jimmy Iovine, the co-founder of Interscope, told him point blank that Davis and Diddy were lovers. Not in the metaphorical sense, not as industry allies. Knight alleged Iovine used the word to mean something far more explicit. Now, Knight isn't exactly a paragon of credibility, but here's the thing. He's not the only one talking. Former associates of Diddy's, like Freddie P. from Making the Band, have gone on record describing a pattern of predatory behavior toward men in the industry, claiming Diddy would approach guys going through financial situations with offers they couldn't refuse. And Davis? He was the man who gave Diddy his start, who vouched for him, who, by some accounts, shared his tastes.
It's layers upon layers. It's those Russian nesting dolls, and you open it, and there's another one in there, and you open, there's another one in there.
Corruption's at all time, bro. The Epstein files.
I heard there's no files. I heard it's a hoax, and then all of a sudden he's going to release the files. Well, I thought there was no files.
Man,
he wants an investigation now.
This brings us to the present. With Diddy locked up and Epstein's files exposing names left and right, Davis finds himself in the crosshairs of two converging storms. The first is legal. If the FBI has evidence tying him to Epstein's operations, or to Diddy's alleged crimes, he's facing a reckoning that could dwarf anything we've seen in music. The second is reputational. Davis has spent decades as the ultimate insider, the man who could make or break careers with a phone call. But now, the industry is turning on itself. Artists are distancing, labels are scrubbing his name from credits, and the whispers are getting louder. Was Clive Davis not just a mentor to Diddy, but a co-conspirator in a system that exploited the vulnerable under the guise of stardom? There's one more layer to this, and it's the most chilling.
I could be attracted to a man, while I still am very attracted to.
In 2013, Davis published a memoir where he came out as bisexual, describing a life split between relationships with women and, later, men. The revelation was framed as a personal journey, a late-in-life embrace of truth. But now, in light of the Epstein files and the Diddy allegations, that disclosure takes on a different weight. Because the question isn't just about Davis's sexuality, it's about whether his private life intersected with the same networks that enabled abuse. And if it did, what does that mean for the dozens of artists he shepherded to fame? We don't have all the answers yet. But we know this. Clive Davis is running. Not from the press, not from the public, from the law. And the only reason a man like that negotiates is if he's got something to lose, or someone to give up. The real question is who. Because in a scandal this big, no one falls alone. And if Davis is cutting a deal, it means the names we haven't heard yet are the ones that could bring the whole house down. Meanwhile, Diddy sits in jail, his legal team insisting he's innocent, his accusers multiplying by the week. And somewhere in the shadows, Davis's lawyers are on the phone with the FBI, trading information for protection, piece by piece. The only thing we can't know is what he's telling them, and who's next. The music industry has always been a machine built on two currencies, talent and silence. And for decades, Clive Davis was its most powerful banker. He didn't just sign artists, he shaped their careers, controlled their narratives, and in some cases, allegedly controlled their lives.
She just said she was in denial on that occasion. And she said it's not as serious as you make out.
The question now isn't just what Davis knew about Diddy's operations, but what he enabled, and who else was part of the system. Because let's be clear, this wasn't just about one man's appetites or another's ambition. This was about an entire infrastructure where access was traded for compliance, where careers were launched in exchange for loyalty, and where the line between mentorship and manipulation was deliberately blurred. And if Davis is now negotiating with the FBI, it's not just his legacy on the line. It's the names of everyone who ever benefited from his protection. We've seen this playbook before. The Epstein files didn't just expose a single predator. They revealed a network of enablers, a shadow economy where power brokers exchanged favors, turned blind eyes, and in some cases, actively participated. Davis' world operated on the same principles. Think about it. When Diddy was rising through the ranks at Uptown Records in the early 90s, who was pulling the strings? Andre Harrell, the label's founder, who had his own complicated reputation. And who was Harrell's mentor? Clive Davis, the same Davis who, by his own admission, saw Diddy's potential and fast-tracked him into the mainstream. But here's the thing. Diddy wasn't just a talented producer. He was a student of the game. And the game, as multiple lawsuits now allege, included a very specific kind of recruitment. Former bad boy artists and associates have described a culture where young, ambitious talent, often from disadvantaged backgrounds, were brought into Diddy's orbit with promises of fame, only to find themselves in situations they couldn't escape. Some have called it grooming, others have called it exploitation. But the through line is clear. This was a pipeline. And Davis wasn't just aware of it, he was at the top of it.
And I think these things like Epstein, and there's probably a bunch of other similar operations that are being run, they provide you with like a really good time, or maybe you're a high profile, extremely wealthy individual, and it's hard for you to get hosed. And some guy tells you, hey, we've got everything covered. You know, you come to my island, nothing, you know, what happens on the island stays on the island.
Now, let's talk about the money. Because in these circles, influence isn't just about who you know, it's about who you own. Davis's labels, Arista, J Records, his stint at Sony, weren't just platforms for music. They were empires built on contracts, on leverage, on the kind of financial control that could make or break a career. And when you have that kind of power, you also have the ability to enforce silence. Look at Cassie Ventura's lawsuit against Diddy. She didn't just allege abuse. She described a system where her career was held hostage. Her music wouldn't be released unless she complied. Her opportunities vanished when she resisted. This wasn't just about one bad actor. It was about an entire machinery designed to keep victims quiet. And Davis? He was the architect of that machinery for generations of artists. The question now is simple. How many of them were protected by the same system that allegedly enabled Diddy's crimes?
Myself is concerned. I was totally straight until through my second marriage. I've got 4 kids and grandkids.
But here's where it gets even more complicated, because Davis's reach didn't stop at music. His social circle included the kind of elite figures who also appeared in Epstein's files: politicians, financiers, even royalty. And while we don't yet know the full extent of his interactions with Epstein, we do know this. The two moved in the same worlds, the same parties, the same private gatherings where the rules of normal society didn't apply. In 2013, Davis published his memoir, The Soundtrack of My Life, where he casually mentioned his bisexuality as if it were just another footnote in a legendary career. But in the context of what we now know about Epstein's operations and Diddy's alleged behaviors, that disclosure takes on a different weight. Because the question isn't about Davis's personal life. It's about whether his private associations intersected with the same networks that facilitated exploitation. And if they did, what does that say about the artists he championed, the executives he promoted, and the industry he helped build? We're not just talking about rumors here. We're talking about patterns.
Davis has always assumed a far more active role than most record company presidents. That's why he was a pioneer in the 60s. It's also why he has survived into the 80s.
And the pattern is this. Wherever Davis went, power followed. And wherever power concentrated, abuse thrived. Take Usher, for example. He spent years carefully distancing himself from his time living with Diddy as a teenager, calling it pretty wild in interviews but never elaborating. But now, with Diddy behind bars and Davis under scrutiny, those vague comments take on new urgency. Because if Davis was the gatekeeper and Diddy was the enforcer, then Usher, and countless others, were the products of that system, and the products are starting to speak. Freddie P., the former Making the Band contestant, has gone on record alleging that Diddy's behavior toward men in the industry was an open secret. He described a culture of coercion where financial desperation was weaponized. He preys on you, Freddie said. And if that's true, then Davis didn't just turn a blind eye. He built the stage. Now, let's talk about the deals. Because right now, Davis's legal team isn't just defending him. They're negotiating. And in cases like this, negotiation means one thing: leverage.
Music is unique. Music is special. Music has a very individual, meaningful role in society, not only to youth.
What does Davis have that the FBI wants? Documents? Testimony? Names? Remember, this is a man who's been at the center of the music industry for over 5 decades. He's seen contracts signed and torn up. He's watched careers rise and fall. And if he's willing to talk, it's not just about his own survival. It's about who he's willing to take down with him. Industry insiders are already whispering about the domino effect. If Davis flips, who's next? The executives who looked the other way? The artists who stayed silent? The lawyers who buried settlements? This isn't just a legal battle, it's a potential purge. And then there's the media strategy. Because while Davis's lawyers are talking to the FBI, his PR team is talking to everyone else. The narrative is being carefully controlled. Notice how, even as the Epstein files drop and Diddy's case dominates headlines, Davis's name is still being handled with kid gloves? That's not an accident. Sources inside major outlets tell us there's been a quiet but aggressive campaign to suppress the most damning details, at least for now. The goal? To buy time, to shape the story before it spirals. But here's the problem. The internet doesn't forget, and neither do the victims. We're at a tipping point. The music industry has spent decades operating on a simple principle. As long as the hits keep coming, the secrets stay buried. But the hits have stopped, and the secrets are starting to surface. Davis' cooperation, if it happens, could be the key that unlocks it all. Because this isn't just about one man's crimes. It's about a system that allowed them to happen. A system where men like Davis and Diddy and Epstein didn't just exploit individuals, they exploited the entire culture. And the culture is finally fighting back.
Her, doesn't it? She probably wants to get out early. So I think that we have more digging to do. I think the DOJ transparency effort here is the right thing, but the reason it's on a Friday, Will, is I think there are no smoking guns. There's other places we have to look.
Well, Buck, you appropriately...
So here's what we know. Clive Davis is scared, not of the past, but of the future. Because the future holds subpoenas and testimonies, and the very real possibility that the names we've all assumed were untouchable will finally be forced into the light. And if that happens, the music industry as we know it might not survive the reckoning. Meanwhile, Diddy sits in jail, his legal team insisting this is all a setup. Davis's lawyers are in back rooms, cutting deals. And somewhere, there's a file, a recording, a contract, a witness, waiting to be the match that burns it all down. Now, we want to know what you think. Do you believe Clive Davis is just another victim of guilt by association? Or is he the missing link between the music industry's darkest secrets and the elite networks that protected them? Drop your theories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because when the next shoe drops, you'll want to be the first to see it. This story is far from over, and trust us, you don't want to miss what happens next. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and as always, stay tuned.